verse or chorus, and I'll tell you which is which. Then I'll tell you that this form is called an octastitch. I'm pants at reading music, and I don't have perfect pitch. But when it comes to writing songs, I've got to scratch that itch. HFO goes live on air, we all expect a glitch. 'Cause every show I do, I know that I will find a hitch. I'm not expecting what I do to ever make me rich. I'm having fun with making music here right now with you on Twitch. Good evening, one and all. I've got sound problems in here. I can't hear anything through OBS at all, but I've fired up things in the wrong order. Good evening to Ryako Music, who has been putting everything into VPC and is now an absolute wreck, and she says I probably need to take a day. I did that on Monday, having health issues, but I think I'm over them. If I'm not, then I'm going to have to go to the doctors, but keep your fingers crossed anyway. I hope you are managing wherever you are, whatever you're doing, whatever you're watching or listening to. If you've got me on in the background, and if you've got me on in the background, why have you got me on in the background? You should be watching. This is informative and educational. And yeah, I have taken steps to improve my stream stability, I hope. The new network card seemed to work a treat on Sunday night. I had one of the best stats for a stream session for many a long day. But just to make sure, I've turned the television off at the wall this evening so that the television doesn't take over. And I got a new router. I realised that my old router was 9 years old, and it doesn't do network protocols like 802.11.ac, which the network card in here does, which my television does. And that basically means faster wireless to the internet. And oh boy, didn't it just. My television now automatically shows things in 4K on YouTube. It's like, wow, that's that's quite a difference. Won't be streaming in 4K to your good selves for a while yet, because I haven't got 4K cameras. Come on, I mean, even getting to full HD was a bit of a step. Good evening, Array of Emotions. Good evening to Mike Tango Charlie. Hello, the gang's all here. Yeah, so new gear. Touch wood, it's been behaving itself. Let us just fire up Twitch Inspector, because I'm a massive nerd and I want to know how things are doing. So Twitch Inspector, there we go. Yeah, once again, looks like we've got a fairly rock solid stream at about 5 megabits a second. Well, 4.939 megabits a second, and that's close enough for government work. It's close enough, works for me. So yeah, and that has meant an improvement in how I do things in the studio, because Native Instruments dropped another update to Contact, their flagship sampling instrument, yesterday. And from seeing it pop up in Native Access and clicking update, to native access saying, update finished. Took less than 2 minutes. And that's a 0.5 gigabyte install. And yeah, I downloaded complete at over 50 megabits a second, which is a little better than the 9 or 10 megabits a second that I was getting. Right, let's get straight into the business at hand, which is music. Music. New freebie for you. Sound the Labs klaxon. Because those lovely people at Spitfire Audio have released another free Labs plugin. And this one is an Autoharp. Basically, if you don't know Labs, Spitfire Audio they do orchestral VST plugins for composers. So they're the people who are responsible for the free BBC Symphony Orchestra Discover package plugin that if you go to the Spitfire Audio site, you can fill in a questionnaire, and then 2 weeks later, the Spitfire Audio app on your computer will tell you that you own the BBC Symphony Orchestra Discover package, and you can start writing music in your DAW for a full orchestra. It's huge fun. But they also have a sort of experimental skunkworks type deal going, which they call Labs. And the Labs plugin is a library of virtual instruments. They're all a bit weird, it has to be said. There's granular whale song. There's trumpet fields, which are the most bizarre trumpets you will ever hear, but they're really, really characterful and really, really good fun to play with. The latest one is a bit sort of Thin Man, auto-harpy. It's played by Christian Henson himself, as it says there, at Castle Sound Studios. Here's the Labs plugin. You get a whole series of articulations. And what does it sound like, Chris? Just shut up and play something. All right, so this is what the Labs Autoharp sounds like without treatment at all. Except I wanted to talk about something that I did in a track last week, and I couldn't get the vibe of the backing vocals to sit right. Okay, when you've got, say, a drum track, let's make ourselves a drum track, shall we? And then we'll just set the default right. So we'll pick a random groove. What's that one? So that's fairly standard Motown groove, isn't it? We'll just loop that because we don't actually need a lot of drums for the purposes of what I'm going to do. So we now have drums. And if I play them in my DAW, they sound like this. Okay, so there is a trick that producers have been doing for donkey's years, which is to take the feed from your drum track. So it's Superior Drummer, there it is, and feed it into another audio track. And I'm going to have to turn it on in the DAW, otherwise we won't hear it. So now we've got 2 drum tracks, and so it'll sound a bit louder, but that's okay. It does sound louder, so I can turn that down. So that's the original drum set. That's my doubled drum set. Okay, so the trick, it's sometimes known as the New York City producer's trick, and it's sometimes just known as parallel compressions. And what you do is you drop a compressor on, we'll do mixture, which is just the standard stock Ableton plugin, right? So now we get a very, very compressed. drums. So let's up that ratio a bit. And if I get rid of it, and then what you do, and we're back to array of emotions and scooping your mids before the compressor. And I'm going to turn that off. Going to turn that to that. So there you go. So I've now scooped out everything apart from the low frequencies and the high frequencies. And now if I bring in the audio feed, you can hear a slight difference. Should make the drums sound a bit punchier. Yeah, you're not convinced, are you? Let's try a different drum kit, because I think what the issue with that may be is that the default drum kit in here is fairly compressed already. So let's try a nice tight dry indie dry drum kit instead. Looks like that. And now we'll try the same thing again. So that's without parallel compression. Gives it a bit more thump, doesn't it? A bit more punch, a bit more sizzle in the cymbals. So, right, that's parallel compression. What I started doing a few years ago is doing the same thing, but with reverb. So I have the Labs Autoharp up here. I have an audio track in my DAW here, which is taking the output from the Labs Autoharp post effects, but pre-mixer, because if I solo it, I still want to be able to hear it. And there's a compressor on it. There's no EQ this time. Instead, what there is Ableton's massive 60-second reverb. So with the two tracks enabled, what we should hear, if I've done this right, is a very, very reverberant Autoharp. So lots and lots and lots and lots of reverb, and it's very, very long reverb. Well, it's 60 seconds reverb, isn't it, really? So you might want to tame that down. So I usually have that really, really low in the mix, like minus 15 dB or so. Might be a bit too low. Oh, you can still hear it. I can still hear it on the monitors here. So let's take it up to about minus 12, shall we? And it just gives a nice ring that hangs around afterwards that adds to the texture, but it doesn't overload it in the way that dropping a normal reverb would. If I drop Valhalla's supermassive reverb onto that track, it goes a bit over the top. So it's a nice effect, and I am a bit of a reverb junkie, but sometimes that's too unsubtle. It's a bit in your face. So with just doing that parallel reverb trick, it hangs around, but it doesn't get in the way. And Autoharp, yeah, so this Autoharp's rather nice. I mean, literally installed it a couple of hours ago. There's slow strums, so I'm going to play one note on my Native Instruments keyboard. Now, that's already annoying me because some of the strums go up and some of the strums go down. And no, I would prefer all the strums to go up and all the strums to go down. Eruke Sounds. Okay, you got me. I'm downloading the Spitfire app as I write this. Good man, Paul. I tell you what, the BBC Symphony Orchestra will change your life. It did me. It has completely changed how I do stuff in here. And but the labs are just, there's just so many lovely toys. That is rather nice, but like I say, I want all the strums to go up or all the strums to go down, or I want separate iterations for both. And there's various other variation. What does that do? So, if you haven't looked at the Autoharp webpage, yeah, that was an Autoharp being played through a Vox guitar amp. Because why not? Works for me. Yeah, that's got potential. There's a lot of free stuff there, I see. There is also a crazy amount of really cheap instruments. And in recent weeks, Mike Tango Charlie has been talking about signal generators, and I said, oh, there's a Spitfire audio plugin that's made. It's called Landfill Totems, and it's made with signal generators that were thrown away from like German nuclear power stations and Russian moonshot laboratories. And I said at the time, well, it's only a matter of time until I buy a copy because it's like 29 quid. And yeah, I kind of weakened. I kind of caved at the weekend, and I bought it. Because 29 quid. So if I just drop them onto this track, interface looks almost the same as Labs. You can see where they sort of cross-fertilize all their research and development, which goes into Labs, and then they monetize it and produce stuff that they actually sell. Mike Tango Charlie says, use it to make space music. I have tried. It's somewhat challenging. If I turn off me parallel reverb, I shall play you some notes from Landfill Totems. In fact, it actually might be quite good with the reverb enabled, and in fact I think we'll take that up a notch. We'll kick it up to minus 10 dB. Right, so this is with parallel reverb. We are floating in outer space. It's all gone dark. There are a whole bunch of different presets that are categorized as cling, yes, clang, knarts, and crack. So what does one get? You get blips, tension, Mike Tango Charlie says, we all float up here. I got that reference, which makes a change. Noise and beauty. Yeah, I mean, there's even a deep space one. I mean, there you go. Let's see what that sounds like with different notes, shall we? Very good for textures. Not too sure about melody. What else we got? Let's try something from Clang. Beauty Oscillator. It's a bit quiet, and that's with compression. What about Knarts? Ooh, yeah, UFO, I like that. And then Crack is percussive, so lots of drum hit. Well, not lots of drum hits, but a few drum hits. I think the use of the word drum there is in heavy inverted commas. Just saying. Yes. So anyway, the new Spitfire Audio Labs plugin. It's called Autoharp. It's rather nice. New Labs, new Spitfire SA recordings, Landfill Totems. Interesting. And if you're into sound design or such like, then probably quite useful. As a musician, I'm not entirely sure that I'll get too much out of it. So, going back to the whole parallel reverb rather than parallel compression, reason why I brought it up is because the track that I played you last week that I said really don't like the way that the what does it mean vocals sit in the mix, and there were a few other things that I really didn't like, and Helicopter wasn't appearing on cue. And so if you'll indulge me, I will play you the new mix of Contemplation, which is one of the songs that I'm writing for the 5090 The Prequel Songwriting Challenge that runs from April the 4th until July the 3rd. And the challenge, because it's 5090 The Prequel, 50 songs, 90 days. Now, I thought I was way behind the curve until today, when, being the massive nerd that I am, I decided that I'd put together a calendar that I could then cross off my progress for songs written during the songwriting challenge so that I get inspired to get to the 50 mark. And it turns out that I've already written 12 and I should have written 13, 14 by today. So I'm not actually that far behind the curve, which pleased me no end. Anyway, this is the freshened up version of Contemplation, and it's now got louder and more striking Helicopter. My next door neighbor's Elvis in disguise. What does it mean? What does it mean? When Jimi Hendrix visits, I am not surprised. What does it mean? What does it mean? They drink with Janis Joplin at the local pub. What does it mean? What does it mean? I think that they're all I feel like I've leveled up in the last sort of half dozen tracks, and I have no idea why, whether it's the new guitar rig, whether it's just generally sitting down going, you know what, he said, rolling his sleeves up because things are getting serious. I think I'm taking more time over a song, and rather than just saying, well, it's formed, just do it and carry on with it, I'm going, no, that's really bugging me. I'm going to have to go back. So there was one line in that track, one of the lines in the final verse, and I realised that I'd used the word, I'd said, you've got to keep your wits around you after dark, because I'd used around in the previous line and wasn't thinking. And it's like, no, it's you keep your wits about you. So I went back and redid the vocals. And then, of course, the vocals in the third verse didn't match the vocals in the other two verses, so I had to redo those as well. And even getting into that level of obsessively going, no, that's annoying, I'm still just 2 tracks behind the curve in meeting my target for 50/90, the prequel, writing 50 songs in the 90 days. Part of the reason that I'm not quite as far behind as I thought I was is that since I left you on Sunday night's show, I've produced 3 new pieces of music. And yes, the guitar effects pedal that arrived last week, the Zoom G6, has given my guitar playing a much needed kick up the pants, because I've been doing a lot of it. So what I started out with doing on Monday was, to start with, actually nothing to do with guitar. It's all to do with synthesizers. Ryako Music says, by the way, I got Arturia Pigments. Excellent. I will show you something that you might not be aware of, which you may have to do depending on whether you're with it or you're a complete numpty like I was and hadn't realised that I had to do it. So we'll cover that in a second. But this track is called Headphonica. I started with this synthesizer line, which is Incomplete Control, Complete Control. So I don't know if you're aware of a record producer called Junkie XL. You may know him as Tom Holkenborg. So Tom started, he was the Little Less Conversation Elvis remix guy in the 90s, but now he's Tom Holkenborg, film composer. So he worked with Hans Zimmer on Man of Steel. He did the soundtrack for Deadpool. He's done a whole bunch of stuff. And he released a video on his YouTube channel last week before, which was my 5 DAW VST plugin synthesizers, what I use in my templates. And one of the I'd got 4 of the 5 that Tom actually talked about. That's because I'm a bit of a synthesizer nerd. But he prompted me, because he was enthusing about this synthesizer. This is Native Instruments Massive X. Now, I bought Massive years ago and loved it. It's great for really aggressive, shouty synthesizer lines, particularly bass. And Massive, I kind of sort of dabbled, but Tom was raving about it, saying it is the most massively powerful synthesizer you could ever hope to come across. And he said, I am but a mere hierophant in terms of my skill level, because it is so complicated. And I sat there thinking, I suppose I ought to start using Massive X then, find out what the fuss is all about. I started off with a nice bass line using Massive X. And then I thought, I wonder if I doubled that. I could get more, because I'm all about layering synths, right? Synthesizer layering is something that I've really, really found to be fun. And thank you, Ableton, for the vote of confidence there. So what I've tended to do is throw an awful lot of synthesizers together, which is why the CPU meter on there is just going nuts at the moment. So let's turn Boink off while we're here. So let's just, so if I solo the synths, so we've got the synths there. So those three, there's Massive X, and then the rest are all Arturia's SEM emulation, which is a lovely 1960s mad synthesizer. Pink Floyd used them a lot. And I basically doubled the tracks by just dragging the MIDI information up to these two tracks. And that was when I decided to turn this into a challenge. And the challenge is, could I make something that sounds musically complex and different and changing and melodically, non-repeating by only using one set of MIDI information? So what there is in this track, all of this MIDI is just that original set of MIDI notes recorded for the bass, and then every other MIDI track uses exactly the same MIDI information. There's no trickery. There's no sort of jiggery-pokery going on in the background. It is just a single set of single MIDI notes. So it's monophonic in terms of the signal going into Ableton. But what I've done is basically created a soundscape by just judicious use of changing patches. And in fact, most of the patches, apart from that Massive X patch, are from the SEM Arturia emulation. There is a lot of stuff going round. There's a lot of panning. There's a lot of waves. Mondo Mod, insane chorus effect unit. And there's an awful lot of guitars. So the end result sounds like this. It's called Headphonica. So yeah, that was what was that? That was Headphonica. And as I said on the chat, there's a few dodgy notes going on around there in the lead Brian May patch in that, which is a patch that I put together myself because the presets in the Zoom G6 kind of sucked. I liked that, says Mike Tango Charlie. Good, glad to hear it. I will. I do this every month, but the stuff that I do every month will eventually end up on Bandcamp. So it's Bandcamp Friday, a week tomorrow. And I will just put up an album of what I have created during 5090, the prequel, to date, as an album for pay what you want, i.e. free download on Bandcamp. And we'll launch that on next week's show, if that's all right with you all, as we normally do. And next week's show will be show number 51. So we are nearly at the first year anniversary of me doing these damn things, which I just find extraordinary. So yeah, that one's certainly not polished and finished yet. But I kind of only did that one yesterday. And as I said, I've been kind of busy in the last few days. And no, we won't save that. Yeah, I wrote 2 pieces yesterday and didn't finish them yesterday because, like I say, I've been kind of a bit under the weather, but I wrote the lyrics yesterday, so got up quite late this morning, it has to be said, and had me breakfast, and then came up here and did the vocals on this track and on the subsequent track. So this is track number 11, and we've got track 12 yet to come. And Mel took a leaf out of your advice book because you were saying you've got to really push yourself and do stuff that you're not particularly comfortable with. And goodness knows what the people on the flats opposite must have thought of me, because I've been standing up using the Rode microphone for my lead vocals, and yeah, it kind of paid off, I think. And again, there's an awful lot of guitar on this. Shock horror, there's absolutely no synthesizer on this whatsoever. It is literally just drums, bass guitar, and an awful lot of tracks of me playing guitar, and an awful lot of tracks of me singing and doing vocals. And yeah, I'll just play it you. This one's called Doldrums. I know right now I should be writing, so tempted just to stay in bed, pretend the monsters that I'm fighting only exist inside my head. Can't find 2 words to string together. So that's Doldrums, and it's kind of still in the process of being mixed because I only rendered that out, 20 to 9 now. I rendered that out 3 hours ago, so still not entirely happy with the mix. The vocals don't sit right, and some of the guitars are too loud and some of the guitars aren't loud enough. So I will go back tomorrow and prat about with it considerably more. But the Zoom G6, as predicted, has rather given me a whole bunch of new toys to play with. That's kind of the whole point of buying it, because the last guitar effects unit that I bought was in 2015, 2016, 2015. So yeah, I've had it a while, and I was kind of dropping into habits with it. So now, because the habits with the patches that I had on the Zoom G3 aren't there anymore, I have to find new ways of doing things. And in the guitar, I started doing stuff that I don't normally do, so that the whole sort of Chris Isaac slapback rockabilly guitar, spring reverb type vibe to it, I found the Zoom G6 does rather well. So, I mean, come on, that's a song right there, really. That's all I needed. But as before, there is a Vox AC30 analog. It uses Vox AC30-ish impulse response for the cabinet modelling and everything else. So if you kind of drop a distorted guitar into it, you just sound like Brian May, particularly when you're doing 4-part harmonies, which I love doing. There are times when I play stuff that I've done and I think, you know what, teenage me would be blown away that he's ended up capable of doing stuff like that, because I never thought that would. And now I look at it and it's like, yeah, it's fairly simple. It's just, a melody line and then it's transposed up. But it works. Mike Tango Charlie says, 3 chords and some words. That is all you need. 3 chords and the truth. But there's I love playing guitar, always have done, as Aruke Sounds knows, because Paul and I went to primary school together and we were both seriously into progressive music and prog rock, even back in primary school. And some things have never changed, quite frankly. So there is a lot of guitar on this. The main tracks are these 3 at the top, and they're again trying to, when you double the guitar, so there's panned left, panned right and center, but are trying to give them slightly different sounds by using different guitars and different pickup selections. So and again, that's not a usual sound for me. It's quite clean, it's quite crunchy, but it's quite clean. It's not massively overdriven. And the second one's almost the same, but it just makes things a little fatter. So the third one is a little more game. 4th. I'm trying to get out of habits, trying to not do the things, not follow the patterns, not walk the paths that I've walked quite a lot since I started doing February Album Writing Month back in 2009 and changed a songwriting output that was on the order of about 3 songs a decade into now having written on the order of 850 songs in the last 10 years or so. And that's how I've got better at songwriting. Not that I'm claiming that by any stretch of the imagination I am what you would consider a successful songwriter. I'm just here in my bedroom. I put my stuff on Bandcamp, and that is it, frankly, at the moment. I'm not particularly healthy, so I don't go out. I do not really play gigs or anything like that. I just like sitting in this studio and making music, and that's kind of why I do these streams, because I like sharing that experience with you. Ryako Music says, I haven't made that many. Lol. Will Beats says, that's goals. You've got to have goals. You've got to, I mean, this is the thing with doing these songwriting challenges. So form February Album Writing Month just gone. The challenge is that you write 14 songs in the 28 days of February, because 14 songs is a pretty decent heft of an album. And I've taken part in February Album Writing Month now for 13 years. And this year I kind of overachieved because ill, stuck at home, not working, sitting in here. Didn't exactly do 14 songs, did more like 32. But some of them were better than others. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about was patterns, paths, habits, because I've subverted the paradigm. That's what I've been doing today. And to do so, what I ended up doing was writing a song about not following old habits, because, as Mel said in the chat just now about that song, she liked the chord progression. So did I, because it's not a 1-4-5 chord progression. It's not E, A, B, A, E. It's not the blues. It's not, A, D, E, or whatever 3 chord. Those are the 3 chords and the truth that Mike Tango Charlie was referring to, the 1-4-5 chord progression, because in a diatonic scale, put your teeth in, Chris. In the diatonic scale, you have 7 notes in the octave, which is effectively the white notes on the scale of C. And the 1st, the 4th, and the 5th note in the scale, the diatonic scale, are the 1, the 4, the 5, and those are the root notes of the chords that people use in the blues chord progression. So anyway, I kind of wrote a song saying, those are bad habits. They're old habits. They're habits that I have had enough of doing, so I am not going to do them anymore. And I set them to music. And the music I set them to is, of course, a 1-4-5 blues progression.
Ever get the feeling what you're doing's nothing new? Do you abandon it, or do you see it through? The muse might tell you set all paradigms aside, but when she told you this, it turned out that she tried and true. Trouble is, we also know that they are boring too. We're always told that we should try to innovate. That art would rather die than let it all stagnate. No joy in creating things if all they do is bore. The last thing that we want to hear is seen it all before. Familiarity is what we're told to hate. Predictability too grim to contemplate. Is following convention a thing we should avoid? To stand out from the crowd, don't do things the same. And if they're not allowed, it's time to change the game. Set those old habits free to die. Art has got to change if it is going to survive. Overturn convention and your work will come alive. You won't succeed if all you do is reinvent the wheel. Abandoning your comfort zone is what'll keep it real. For your next creation, if you want to see it thrive, find a new progression and abandon 145. Is following convention a thing we should avoid? To stand out from the crowd, don't do things the same. And if they're not allowed, it's time to change the game. Set those old habits free to die.
So again, that is another draft, not entirely finished, not entirely convinced that the verse vocals need to be that low. It's Ryako Music says very kindly that your vocals have more energy. That's because I've been standing up, bellowing into that from a much further distance away than I am with my trusty Shure SM7B, which I do tend to just sit comfortably in the chair and stick my nose on. And it does mean that vocals tend to be a bit staid, bit stuck in the mud. So moving about and bopping away with the road, which picks up stuff from a lot further away, it will pick up birds in the garden for a start, which is rather irritating, although it was rather nice this afternoon when I was sitting in here and looked out the window, which is behind the camera there, and saw a heron float past, which is quite unusual for this part of the world. But yes, somebody had better look out for their goldfish pond. That's all I'm saying. Comfort is for weaklings, says Ryako Music. That is absolutely true. So I will probably go back for this one. And I kind of... The backing track, for some reason, makes me think of Jeff Beck, even though there's no sort of very, very shouty, stroppy Jeff Beck type guitar on it. So I was sort of thinking, listening to it then, maybe it should have So I will probably faff about with this over the next few days. And for Sunday night show, I may well have completely changed it and re-recorded everything, because that's what Head First Only tends to do. It's the Head First Only way, certainly at the moment, is sitting listening to it, especially now because I've taken 3 hours off after mixing for most of today, and listening to it with fresh ears, which is very important. Never mix tired. Certainly never master your stuff tired, because you will make appalling decisions. I certainly do. So always take time out, come back to it with a fresh set of ears and listen, and end up doing what I was doing just now, which was going, oh dear, I don't like that. Oh, well, that's wrong. No, yeah, no, that will not do. But I think there's the bones of a fairly decent song on that. Went for a very, very odd Easy Drummer expansion pack to do this. I just felt like mixing it up, because I tend to use Superior Drummer's Metal Foundry expansion pack, and there is a drum kit in the Metal Foundry expansion pack which was put together by Devin Townsend, because it's what he uses when he creates demos for his music. But I went back to an Easy Drummer expansion pack, which I'm still using within Superior Drummer 3, because that's what I use. But it is this rather sort of strange hybrid electronic and traditional kit. So normal bass drum, normal snare, normal brass, but lots and lots of bleepy goodness for the drums. And just to make it even more emphatically bleepy goodness and electronic, I've dropped the Ableton Redux Bit Crush plugin, which basically reduces the number of bits used to encode the audio of that track. And as a result, if I play it, it's very, very staticky, very, very crunchy. But because I'm me, what I really like doing is using the old gated reverb trick. And suddenly, you've got a pretty killer drum sound. So what am I doing? Well, like we did with the parallel compression trick that I talked about at the beginning of the show, and then the parallel reverb, where I said you take the audio out from one track and you feed it into another audio track. It's exactly what I'm doing here. I'm taking the audio from the Superior Drummer track into a separate audio feed. There it is. See, Superior Drummer. Post effects, but pre-mixer, because if I solo the track, I want the effects to continue. And then on that track, there's a fairly long plate reverb, but I don't want the reverb to just tail off. So I drop a noise gate on after the end of it, so that when the gate on the reverb hits a certain threshold, cuts off completely. So if I just play you the gated drums, all you're hearing that's being added to the drum sound is when the drum sound gets above a certain level. But when it drops below that level, it stops. And it sounds weird, but it was the sound of the 80s. And it sounds like this. So you can hear it's reverberant, but it stops. But combine it with the drums, and only some of the drums are reverberant. So it's like having a drummer that's half in a broom closet and half in the staircase at Headley Grange, which had that enormous reverberation decay time that was what John Bonham used for When the Levee Breaks. So I love gated drums. Well, I love 80s production, because the 80s was... I was in my 20s in the 80s. Yes, I am old. And yeah, that's the kind of sound that I love. Mike Tango Charlie says, I'm getting View to a Kill vibes. Absolutely. Duran Duran's View to a Kill. Most of David Bowie's output in the 80s had totally that gated drum vibe. The drummer who actually started it off, of course, was Phil Collins. On Peter Gabriel's album, and the engineer was Hugh Padgham, who was the guy that we can lay the blame for gated drums firmly at, because it was something to do with the way that the talkback mic, which is basically a little button that you press down and there's a microphone on the mixing console that lets you talk through to the studio, and when the studio noise came back they dropped a noise gate on it for some strange reason, and it did that kind of stuff, and everybody went, do not touch any of the controls on the mixing console till we find out how we've done that. Mike Tango Charlie says, that was one of the first songs I taped off the radio. And quite probably one of the cheesiest videos that I have ever seen. I mean, just Simon Le Bon on the Eiffel Tower being accosted by fans going, the name's Bon. Simon Le Bon. It's like, Mike Tango Charlie says, it was also the first Bond movie I saw. Goodness me. I got taken to the cinema by my father at the age of 11 to see Diamonds Are Forever. So Connery will, of course, always be the one true Bond. He will always be my Bond, in kind of the same way that Tom Baker is my Doctor. But yes, it wasn't people say it wasn't a very good Bond film, but I loved it. I mean, for a start, you had Charles Gray from the Rocky Horror Picture Show and many other great films, including things like The Devil Rides Out, as Blofeld, and so many really, really appallingly bad one-liners or just ridiculous things that Connery says. So he gets buried in the desert outside Las Vegas in an oil pipeline, and he's sitting in the pipeline and a rat walks up to him and he just looks at the rat and says, one of us smells like a Torch handkerchief. I'm rather afraid it's me. Sorry about that, old chap. But of course manages to escape. Anyway, to close this evening, I promised Mel that I would talk her through some of the wonders of this chap, which is Arturia's flagship polychromatic synthesizer. What does that mean? It's got loads of different colours on it, frankly. No, it has a number of different... If you're a synth nerd, right, there's additive synthesis, there's subtractive synthesis, there's frequency modulated synthesis, there's wavetable synthesis, there's sampling, there's all sorts of different ways of making a piece of electronics make a bleepy noise. Okay. Pigments started off with quite a few of those synthesis methods available. However, they have added to that with this new harmonic synthesis engine, which does all sorts of amazing things. And we were talking about this last week, right? So last week I said there's loads of presets, and yeah, they're all lovely. And so what I hadn't realised is that some of the presets that I had got with the version 3 release of Pigments, because this dropped literally last week, I wasn't seeing them because I hadn't downloaded them. And there is an Arturia software updating tool which you install, and that installs Pigments, it installs your V collection, it installs any of their effects emulations that you may have purchased. But, and this is a big but because I'd completely forgotten it, that doesn't download the new presets that you get with Pigments 3, because you have to go to your library by clicking on that button there, and then you go to My Banks. Okay, and there are all of these libraries, that the Spectral Sounds Pack update that you can get if you buy Pigments at the moment. You get it bundled for like $20. It's worth doing, but you have to go to this page within Pigments itself and actually click on these libraries to download them, because otherwise they will not appear. And there's 100 presets in each of these 5: amethyst, crimson, malachite, ochre, and onyx. Right, onyx is drums. So there's a whole bunch of really quite stroppy drums. There's some nice risers. So just the complexity of the way these sounds evolve, it's just brilliant. Bet that'd be nice with a bit of Supermassive dropped on it, wouldn't it? Shall we have a listen again? Just instant dance track, and that's just one preset. And you've got to love a preset that's called Chonk, haven't you? So yeah, Onyx, I kind of not been playing an awful lot with, but the ochre is rather nice. Riaka Music says, I didn't receive it, but contacted customer service and they replied quite quickly. That's good. Arturia's servers really need a bit of an upgrade, I think. The difference between downloading the new drop of Contact, which dropped literally yesterday, which was 0.5 gig, and I was able to download that at 50 megabits plus a second. Arturia, I couldn't get on their server for half a day when they dropped Pigments because it was just swamped. Rather nice, isn't it? And if you don't splash out for the 5 spectral, whatever they're called, expansions, there are also a whole bunch of new presets that just come with Pigments 3. And there's, again, loads of really, really good ones. website is not intuitive, says Ryako Music. It needs a redesign. Yeah, there's so many. I mean, I really find that with a lot of company websites. The Spitfire's is pretty good. They have a landing page which tells you what the deal is, what the new stuff is, and they let you find their stuff quite easily, quite readily. But yeah, Arturia and Native Instrument. So I've been having issues with my Native Instruments Complete Audio 6 audio interface. So it's a 6 in, 6 out USB audio interface, and it's less than a year old. I'm using the latest driver, which is version 5. And it loses the plot on a regular basis if I push the processor too hard. The scary black box, says Ryako Music. Indeed, the scary black box with the nice white LED bar graphs on it. And yeah, it's when I'm pushing stuff too hard on this system, and it's a fairly good system. It just kicks over some of the channels in the complete audio so that they just go all bit crushed, and it just goes and it's like, oh. And it quite often does it while I'm recording a take. It records the take fine, so it's the output stage, not the input stage, that's doing it. How weird, says Ryako Music. Absolutely. It's driving me nuts. And I tried rolling back to a previous version of the driver yesterday. I've spent a couple of days using that. I'm still doing it. Revomotion says, could it be an issue with the data transfer rate of your USB? Mike Tango Charlie says, I remember that. That's a good point, Revomotions. But it's a USB 2 interface. All USB interfaces tend to be USB 2, and just in case, I have actually got it plugged into a USB 3 port, but I might pull things apart because I'm using the data cable that came with the unit, because they said you should only use our data cable, and it's like, why? So I may actually try changing for a more expensive data cable and see if that makes a difference. But who knows? But yeah, Mel, if you're playing with Pigments and there are things you want to talk about or ask me, please do. Very quick overview. There are tabs. They don't look like tabs, but there are tabs up here on the top right. So the default is the synthesizer engine, which gives you the stuff like I've got on these things behind me. So things like oscillators and filters and envelope generators and signal processor like chorus and stuff at the end. That's what you've got here. Although it may not look like it, you've got 2 signal generators on this. You've got the first one, which is using harmonic. You've got the second one, which is not turned on. So let's turn it on. So that's now analog, which is basically like one of those. So there's 2 oscillators. In fact, there's 3 oscillators. I beg your pardon. They're currently set to unison, which means they'll all make the same note. I can turn that off. Or can I not? Oh, I see. Classic unison mode. And then... and you can modulate stuff by basically setting one of the oscillators to modulate. Doing all sorts of stuff. Once you've got your sound, you can then apply signal processing effects to it. So reverb, multiband compression, delay. So what have we got there? Oh, we can change the order, drag and drop. Isn't that lovely? But it's complete. Oh, it's fallen over. No, it hasn't. It's just thinking about it. So there's no delay there. Let's turn the delay up. That's quite loud, says Array of Emotions. Yeah, it is, isn't it? Shall we turn that down a little bit? I think it's a bit too enthusiastic. But it all sounds better once you drop delay on it. Yes. And sequencing is not turned on. So let's find a sequenced thing, and then I'll show. I mean, come on, Star Wars fans, we've got to have something called Ewok Rave, haven't we? So it's 16 beats to the bar. But you see, my Ewoks are into prog, so 16 beats to the bar is just for newbies. Let's have 11 beats to the bar. So an 11/8 time signature. All I've done is just slide that across to 11 beats to the bar, and now and so all of these things are controls. So at the moment they're not doing anything, and we can change that. So I can basically drop things up and down an octave. And now you're all going to have very, very strange dreams about acid-crazed Ewoks running amok on Endor tonight, aren't you? Basically. So, yeah, my work here is done. But no, it is a stonkingly good synthesizer. You can actually change the probability of it doing something different, just as you can change the probabilities of MIDI notes happening in Live 11, which is something I haven't even tried scratching the surface of. Hey, Dazed and Confused, hello. So, same kind of dreams as usual. And hello. Man, the dreams I had last night. And I hadn't even had cheese for supper. Just the last few nights. I don't know where my subconscious is going with this, but there was, for some reason, I was in San Francisco, but at one point I was in a car park of a restaurant where I'd been out with a meal with some friends, and we turned around and one of the old Muni bendy buses, you know, the ones with the pantograph cables that run to the electrical wires in the streets in San Francisco, came through the car park, but it was flying, and everybody just sort of went, Muni's late. And it was like, what? Good time to pop in to hear that craziness. Lol, says Cody. Yes, absolutely mad. So yes, raving Ewoks. Ryako Music, Cheese Affects Your Dreams. That is one of the first old wives' tales that I can ever remember being told. Probably by my grandmother. And that was, if you want to have weird dreams, you eat cheese for supper. And conversely, she said, never eat cheese for supper because you will have very, very strange dreams. And of course, me being there was going, ooh, really? You know, surreptitiously grabs a large chunk of Lancashire cheese to take up to bed with me. But yeah, cheese, apparently, the old wives' tale goes, affects your dreams. Whether there is any medical research on this, who knows? But that apparently, that is the story, right? So try it tonight, kids. Probably not processed cheese, because that stuff's just evil and is only allowed on beef burgers. But yeah, if you've got some, and come on, David and Mel live in Belgium. They're going to have access to probably some of the finest cheeses in the world. But how did we get onto this? I've got a wedge of brie, says Riaka. Well, there you go. Oh, brie, perfect. Oh, my treat, right. And it's a completely vegetarian, but not vegan, because, geez. Croissants, cut open, slice of brie inside, big teaspoon of cranberry sauce, stick the top back on the croissant, put it in the oven, gas mark 6 for 5 minutes. Lush. And I might do that for breakfast this weekend. Speaking of dreams, says Mike Tango Charlie, I've got to grab some Z's. You go and grab some Z's, mate. Thank you for joining us. We're kind of done here today because it's getting on for... good Lord. Yes, we'll be going nearly 2 hours, although there was that sort of interruption at the beginning, so it kind of isn't 2 hours. So, yes, as Dazed and Confused says, sweet dreams of Ewok waves. Ewok raves, Mike Tango Charlie. Eat cheese, says Mike Tango Charlie. And, yes, thank you one and all for joining me. Sorry it was a bit sort of... weird at the beginning, but we got there in the end, and I will now go off and play with those pieces of music a bit more, and no doubt share them with you again on Sunday. I will be back on Sunday at 2100 BST. I will be back here a week today at 1930 BST for a Head First Only Thursday night live stream number 51. Yes, we're nearly at the 1 year mark. So might have to do something appropriately celebratory for 2 weeks' time from today. But until then, I will bid you a very, very pleasant good night. If you're out and about tomorrow, please obey social distancing rules. Please continue to wear a mask. But whatever you're doing, stay safe, stay sane, stay well, stay Wayne, and I'll see you next time. So cheers, everybody.